Hey, what up? Yeah, I guess I need to put myself on the screen here when we start off. There we are. There, better not stretch my arms out either. There's stuff everywhere. But good morning, guys. All right, let's see. We'll get going here in just a minute. But as we do, let me just kind of get my own stuff here all set up. And we got some cool stuff to look at here today. So let me get this going. Good morning, Markham. Uh-oh, these photos are going to be out of order. That's okay. Good morning, Stargeting. How's it going there? So, well, since you're here, I was going to go in like the reverse order. I've got all the photos here just popped into folders for my convenience. But since you're here, Stargeting, we can take a look at yours first. So then if you got other stuff to do, you can hop out after that or hang out if you want. But Brian, I had Brian's queued up. I was going to look at first, but I don't know if he's here, so we'll put his off until a little bit later. So let's just get right down to business. But just a little introduction as we get started. I know there's not too many people in here quite yet, but just if you guys have never seen these videos before, I try to do them about once a month. This one's a little bit late because of the whole contest wrapping up and everything. It's just been kind of very hectic recently with that. But yeah, so these, like I said, I try to do about once every month. These are critique videos for some of my Patreon supporters. So big thank you to them as well, as always, for their support. So if you guys are interested in submitting stuff to future episodes, you can check out my Patreon. The link is down below, or like in all of my videos, it's down below in the video description on all of them. So you can check that out if you're interested, or just hang out and see what some of these guys are working on and listen to some of my thoughts on them. As for like a critique and feedback for like the clean versus weathered contest entries, I think we will maybe be doing a little bit more of that, but it's not really scheduled at the moment. So we'll let you guys know about that if you wanted to see more about that. But all right, so let's talk about Stargeting's here. He sent basically a couple of photos of 3 works in progress: the B-Wing Star Wars kit here, the Grosser Hund kit, and the second V HG kit here. So he just got like a couple photos each. These are all still work in progress, so nothing finished yet on these. But we'll take a look at those. So let's see, just regarding the second V, let me just refer back to, and Stargeting's here in the chat, so we have questions or things we can talk about that. But he said the second V needs another coat or 2 on almost everything and cleanup. I'm not sure if I want to go any further than that. So another coat or 2, Stargeting, based on just your comment in the email. You mean like coat of paint on stuff, or you mean like just coats of weathering? Is this a hand painting on this? It looks a bit like it is, yeah. The sort of unevenness of the paint, which I'm guessing is like the intentional effect that you're going for. Looks like it's a hand painting. Sort of like Machine and Krieger, kind of Max Watanabe style, where sort of you're creating a sort of weathered look through the process of doing it by hand painting, yeah? Yeah. Yeah, okay, so you're gonna do one more color. Yeah, I would say definitely one more pass. But the thing that's tricky with that, right? Because, you know, like the whole point of painting like in that style is, like I was just saying, is you want to kind of leave it a little bit intentionally, you know, use the process like to your advantage, in that it gives it a slightly weathered look. If you keep doing layers of paint and make it totally opaque, then you kind of lose that effect. So yeah, it's kind of a tricky balance. Practicing some in-scale weathering by leaving behind. Yeah. So yeah, I mean, yeah, there's some areas where I would say definitely needs another coat, but then you got some areas where, at least from these photos, where it looks very opaque already. So like this spot, like here on the front skirt. So yeah, I would hit it in like some areas where it needs it, but I mean, definitely some areas look kind of already done enough. So I mean, I'm sure you know what you're doing. But yeah, I can see where it needs a little bit more in some areas, but after that, then yeah, obviously just the cleanup stages. So I think people who are maybe kind of a little bit less familiar with the kind of technique that Stargate is using here, this is kind of, I don't know if there's a particular term that we use, but I mean, we all kind of know that it's in the ugly stage, right? Where you're doing your hand painting and it just looks terrible before you actually start to clean it up. So yeah, it looks a bit of a mess right now, but I can see what you're going for, and I can see how, like, the direction that it's going in. It's in that stage where you're still working on the painting, and then it's after you make a mess of it, then you go into the refining steps, and that's when it all kind of comes together. So I can see that. I think it's going to be looking pretty cool. It would be nice to see that kind of painting effect applied onto the second V. I think it'll be a unique look for the Victory, which usually when we see Victory kits, they're like almost always very clean. You don't really see that kind of look on these type kits. The only thing that's a little bit strange is that the backpack looks like it has much more of a red undertone. Is that just because the backpack has less coat on it? Like it looks like ass. Yes, exactly. So maybe the other white parts have one more coat on compared to the backpack. Did you use what's the under? Did you use like a pink primer or mahogany primer? I wonder what the primer color is, because if it's like a mahogany primer, then that can be okay. So he says the backpack only has one coat of white on it, so yeah, that's why it's looking like quite different color. But I wonder what color the primer is, the surfacer. So mahogany primer will give you like a kind of a red oxide surfacer. Okay, yeah, so that's why. Okay, yeah. I forgot that was a thing. I just kind of think brown normally for doing this kind of thing, but okay. So that's why it's looking very pinkish. But yeah, unlike the rest of the body where that has more coats, I would say, I don't know, a second or third, but at least more paint on it. You can still see some of that like pink coming through of that red, kind of red oxide color underneath, but it's much less. I think depending on what you do with the weathering, yeah, depending on what you do with the weathering, if you really make it like really kind of rusty looking or not. If you're not going for a very rusty look, I think I would try to tone down some of the pinks a little bit. But if like rust in some areas is what you're going for, then you can utilize that pink tone in some of those areas. But it depends on what you're going for. So yeah. But overall, I mean, I think it's a cool concept to paint like this particular kit in that particular style. So I think it'll be interesting to see how this turns out when it looks done. But just again, like for those of you guys who are kind of unfamiliar with this process, you know, it takes some more paint, and then you bring it all together with like the weathering and different filtering and stuff that you do on it, and it should have a pretty cool look to that, I think. Yeah, when it's done. Let's then see, what did you say? The Grosser Hund, you said it is on oils and some additive chipping, and looking for thoughts overall. So this one is in kind of the sort of finishing stages on this. It's nearly done, I would imagine then. I think we have 3 photos of this guy, right? We have one of the back here as well too. The color looks nice. I like that really dark color you used for like the kind of inner frame, as it were, of it, compared with this nice sandy like yellow tan color used for the armor. The white parts, what do I want to say, band, that looks good as well too. So I mean, the colors look good on some of like the I'm guessing like this sort of like brown wash or kind of staining here on the back. I'm guessing that's maybe some of the oils. I think that could probably be worked in a little bit. You can see like some of the process still like on that part, like here on the shoulder or something, like it looks pretty good. On the arms, I think it's all looking pretty nice. You can see some nice streaking there on this little panel down there. That looks good. It's just on the I can't remember what they're called on this one, Panzerschreck or something, but some of that I guess oil probably on there. maybe work with that a little bit more on that part there on the backpack. I was going to definitely work it with oils following. Yeah. So there's that, but I mean, just looking around on like some of the other panels, I think maybe like here on the end of the gun, just where you got a little bit of some like buildup of the color on there. Maybe tone that down in some areas. I mean, you want like some visible streaking, and some areas are going to be like more visible than others. But maybe just like that little bit there towards the end of the gun looks a bit heavy. That kind of yellowish olive kind of color bit on that. But as far as like the other scratches and stuff, those all look pretty nice. You got some like little bits of scratches there on some of these plates. Just little ones, nothing like super heavy. Some more definition like around here on like the face parts as well too. I'm not sure what else you're gonna do on that to bring out some of those details, but the face, I mean, because like it's difficult because the rest of these panels on the design is just like these big panels of armor, and like the face actually has kind of a lot going on with all these different parts. So I feel like it needs something more to kind of bring out some of the details or something on this, because it just looks like there's a lot of like parts on there that have like a purpose, but it looks like somebody just like threw a bucket of paint and just covered the whole thing with paint, where some of these would be like actually like useful parts. I'm not sure what the word I'm looking for is, but you know what I mean.
Did you bring that up?
A lady just dropped it off.
Ooh.
Some lady. I don't know. Sorry. But you know what I mean? So I think something more just like painting a couple of the details or something like that, just to bring those out there on the face, maybe in that same internal color, because those internal sections look really nice, having all these sort of mechanical bits. But so, and then you have some of these parts here on the face that also kind of have that same kind of mechanical look, but they're just all painted in that same color as the armor. So I think maybe a little bit of separation of those could look nice. Just kind of bring out some of the detail on the face. But otherwise, I mean, I think it's looking really good. It's looking nice, yeah. See here on the back. The heart on the butt plate. It's nice. Yeah. Yeah, no, I mean, I'm liking it. Is this I'm trying to remember the design. Does it normally just have like these big balls on the back of the feet, or is that like missing a piece? I have mine here. Oh, it is like that, isn't it? That's interesting. I never really noticed that about the design, but there you go. So it's just got those big, what look like empty ball joints, like there should be another piece attached onto there, but fair enough. No, I think it's looking pretty good. I need Aaron and Mike here to talk about weathering, but if I were to channel them, I would say maybe it looks a bit like the weathering's a bit even over the whole thing. Maybe, I mean, you've got the weathering a little bit heavier down here towards the bottom, but I think maybe you could push it even maybe a little bit more. Get some darker staining and stuff going on like towards the bottom. Because like on the leg panels, they're pretty similar to like what's going on in the arms, and even like the backpack areas all look kind of pretty evenly weathered, which, I mean, depends on the situation, you know, how you're imagining it. But I think if you wanted, you could push the weathering on like the lower part of the kit a little bit more. Like you can see like the foot and the ball are there's nothing really too dark going on there. And yeah, it just depends on like what the setting you're imagining for it. If you're imagining like this is a machine that's operating like inside of like a base, or like in a kind of urban setting or something like that, then it, you know, the feet or like the lower areas of the robot wouldn't be as dusty and dirty. But if it's in then like a natural like forest environment, or just like out on like a battlefield where it's getting a lot of dirt and stuff, then I think you could add some more around the feet and everything. If you're going to channel them, you have to do the voices. Oh, I could try an Australian voice, but I don't know if I could get Aaron's. I think mine would be like a much more generic. Aaron's, I don't know enough about Australia to know about the different dialects, but I think my fake Australian accent would be probably a different dialect from Aaron's. So anyway, yeah, I like that. Let's just go on to the B-Wing then. The B-Wing, kind of, he just checking Stargate's email here. He noted that he's kind of feeling a bit off on the colors, but wanted one more coat of paint overall, and then adding the white stripes and accents to clean it up. Also testing the silicone barrier chipping on it. That was my immediate thought. Even before I read your email, I was looking at the photos, and I was just thinking that, yeah, the blue is a bit bright for what we normally see, like from a Star Wars spacecraft like this, I feel like, but I was feeling like I bet like a big white band on that would really tie it together though. And then I checked your email and you said, yeah, you're gonna add that. So yeah, I think this will definitely be looking nice once you add the white accent on there. So I think the color will work out. And depending on like what top coat you use, I'm always kind of keeping in mind that the top coat that I usually tend to use is just like the Mr. Color flat coat. Always tones the colors down like a big notch. So I always think the colors are too bright, and then once I hit it with a top coat, it's brought down right just to that right level. So if you're going to be using a top coat like that, a nice matte top coat, that'll make that blue much less bright. And I think it'll probably be right at that perfect level. So I think you're probably safe on that blue color. It looks like there's two different colored blues that you're using, or is that just, yeah, I would imagine. So there's a darker blue and a lighter blue, right? So I'm not sure if it's two different color blues or you're just maybe the darker areas just haven't got another coat of paint on there, but I think it's two different colors, isn't it? But no, I think you're seeing a little bit of the undertones. You got some yellows and reds from the undertones still poking through there, but those will be, I mean, toned down. You said you're going to do another coat on it, but leave a little bit of that in there so you get the effect. But adding the white band, I think will be good. And then just the finishing touches on that, I think it's looking good. Yeah. Yeah. So other than that, you got some painting going on here in the cockpit. Of course, looks nice. They're bringing out some of those details. So yeah, I think it's looking good. I like seeing the little bits of color and everything on there. I think it'll look good once that's finished up. So I wouldn't worry too much about the color. I think it'll probably be okay. It'll still probably end up being a little bit brighter than what like we would normally see. And I love Star Wars, but not enough to know about the canon of things like this. So I don't know if there's a blue version of this exists in canon, that maybe this color is actually very similar to the color that is actually canon in like one of the stories or something. But if I had to guess, I would say this blue is still probably going to be a little bit brighter than probably what we would see in the movies or anything, but I think it's fine. Yeah, it'll look cool. For like the white band, I don't know how large you're planning on going with that, but I mean, I would feel comfortable making it pretty large. So if the white band is like too thin, then I don't know if it'll really balance out the color as much as like we're both hoping that it will. So I would feel comfortable making it pretty thick on there, a pretty wide band of white on there to balance out the blue, not to make the blue so overpowering. But yeah, very cool. Thank you, Stargeti. Some cool stuff to share, and you're always working on some cool things there, so appreciate that. Then let's go to Brian next, who shared his SD Neo Zeong that he was working on. So this is something, if you guys follow Brian, Kodokai or Bro Builder, whatever you want to call him, if you guys follow him around on his different social media sites or his YouTube channel or whatever, you probably haven't seen this for a while. He was working on this previously, and it's been a little bit, but he hadn't sent photos in for critique of this, so that's why he wanted to send me some of these photos to check out. So this kit may be a little bit old news for some of you guys who follow his work, but we haven't talked about it here, so here we are. But he sent some work in progress photos and some finished photos. So it is finished. So here you can just take a look at the finished photos to see how this turned out. Brian, a big fan of green, so it's green. There we go. So we'll kind of go back and forth, just give you guys a look at kind of how it turned out, and then we'll go back and look at the work in progress photos and see what all you do with it. But I mean, it's definitely to see the Neo Zeong in this really bright green color. It's one of those things where like you have an image of a mobile suit in like a certain color, so seeing it in any different color, like other than red, is kind of immediately kind of jarring for me. But I mean, the colors look nice. Let me see here. It's just weird to see the Neo Zeong in not red or white, I guess. But so we'll talk more about the colors and stuff, and like my thoughts about the finished design here in a bit. But let's just go back to see some of the work in progress. So yeah, the kit, if you guys are unfamiliar, the inside of these arms is all hollow. So he's just using some plot plate there to turn those into full arms and not having these big hollow gaps in them. Otherwise, you'd see like on these arms, which like based on like the pose that he used and the photography, you wouldn't really notice that all that much. But like here on the underside of the arm right there, and then like on over here, those would just be hollow gaps had he not filled those in. So he covered those up to get rid of the gaps on the underside of those arms. So that's good. And then changing the shape of these parts, but I don't remember well enough what the original shape looks like, but I'm guessing it's probably just thinner and sharper compared to what the original kit is like, the shoulder parts here, because the same basic shape, right? But I think maybe he extended them to be a little bit longer, a little bit thinner, a little bit sharper than what's on the original kit probably. So that's cool. And I'm not sure if that's just straight up like epoxy putty, just molded like that, or like what he used to mold that. I'm not sure offhand. The original shoulders were short and stubby, Chris said. So yeah. Also 2 clamshells. Right. So these would be the shoulder parts, I believe, right, of the Shinanju. So you got rid of I think like they had like a very, there is a detail of these like verniers in the shoulders, but it's like that SD style where there's like nothing behind it. It's just like a flat kind of vernier detail there, very simple. So obviously much more detailed pieces using here, some what look like probably plastic vernier pieces, but then used on these metal pieces there, and some just like rubber hose bits to give that detail up underneath the shoulder, which again, looking at the finished photos, is a detail that's pretty invisible. Ultimately, it's up in here with it being black, or even if you look at like the more well-lit photos, you can see it. I mean, you're catching little bits of that detail up in there. So ultimately, it's worth the effort. But yeah, attention to detail there. Nice. And then filling in the back of this part there with some putty, just to give that a more solid feeling of that piece of armor. And then here on the underside, so remaking these, which are those thruster bells? Are those just like 3D printed parts, or what? Are those scratch built or 3D printed or something, or what? And then also adding this hose in here, which is like a very uncomfortable color. It looks like intestines or something like that, kind of gross looking. But as again, just adding some nice detail up in there, I can appreciate that. And also, he made it that all these big giant thruster bells are not the same. These 3 at the bottom are the same, and the 2 side ones are different. That's cool. If you're going to make it like that, that kind of makes sense, I suppose, that the side ones are kind of off to the side. So those are maybe a bit more like just kind of like your main thrusters. And these 3 ones can be like just sort of separate kind of rockets. I don't know. Anyway, but I get it. Makes sense. Scratch built. Okay, so yeah, scratch built. What's that? 12 of those. Again, I would have opted for just using some available detailed parts, but there you go. Brian's a mad lad, so he just scratch built those. There you go. And then adding some more of like the same metal parts and hose like parts up inside of there as well too, so that all looks cool. This one is just kind of showing the different thruster belts that he used. So yeah, I'm not sure which ones are the ones that are original on this kit, but I think all of these are added. These are all not original to the kit. I don't remember what the original ones look like, but I'm pretty sure these are all different. So those are all swapped different parts from different kits or something, I would say. Kit bashed parts, looks like, from other stuff. It's good use of those. This is removing seams on the shoulders. So here you can see what the original shoulder armor looked like. Yeah, it's much shorter there compared to what he did with that. Going back to this photo here. So yeah, added quite a bit of length onto those. And what else am I looking at in this photo? Just some kind of general workspace, a bunch of stuff under construction. This is filling in the empty spaces with putty. Yes, a lot of work to do that. And then cleaning this all up like that. What a pain in the ass. That's the trouble with SD kits, yeah. The entire bottom is the original part, and that's it, yeah. So you have to fill all this in with putty, and then to actually clean it up to look presentable, had to go in and file that. I mean, that's probably just done with like a bunch of filing and sanding and everything just to get that, remake the shape how it's supposed to look in there. So yeah, for 4 of those arms, I think or 6. Do all the arms have that, or is just the back 4? Do the 2 main arms also have that as well too? I guess probably, yeah. Don't they? Anyway, and he got rid of the molded Zeong logo on the back, Neo Zeong logo, and replaced that with the this one, which is from that set. But the relief set that you can get, the HT Builders parts, but I think he probably had to slice that off. So probably had to cut off, because I think that's like molded onto like a little plate sort of thing, which is just flat. So I'm guessing what he did, I think probably is cut it off from that and then have to kind of bend the part to make it fit onto the back here, which is cool, definitely. And this is something we've talked about, actually. If you guys have remember back to an episode a long time ago, we talked about Brian he used one of those relief parts in a different kit on like a custom Marisa, I think it was, that he built. And that was one of my critiques, is that I didn't really think it fit very well on that, because those relief parts, I find more often than not, I just don't think they really fit on a lot of designs. Some people use them pretty effectively. Like in this case, I think it's used effectively there. But for like 9 times out of 10, I think they just end up looking kind of ugly. So yeah, I think that was used nicely on there. And yeah, obviously it looks much better than the little one that's on there at the start. And then the same thing done here on the shield as well too. Looks like that part is added onto there. And then also maybe added these strips of plot plate to just kind of add some more raised definition onto these little parts of the shield there. Looks like. And a priming stage photo. Very nice. And he did some work on like the front crotch part here as well too. So built that out a little bit more as well too. Gave it a much more pronounced dong on the front, which here we can see primed. It looks great, yeah. So that ended up being a nice addition. Would have been maybe cool to extend the front skirts a little bit as well too, like kind of to match. It's not that like the front part sticks out too much and then like it's too uneven, but I just think just to, well, it looks like he maybe did extend out these parts on the side a little bit there as well. So the front skirts are extended a little bit, it looks like. But I think maybe could have gone even a little bit more, but it's just subjectively. If it were my project, which it wouldn't be, I would not be committed enough to put in this much work on an SD kit. But if I were, I maybe would have extended those front skirts a little bit more as well too, but not a big thing. This is really nice. All this detail added onto the inside of these panels looks really nice. That's great. So I'm guessing that's just a plastic rod, and it just sliced a bunch of little salami pieces of that and just glued them all down individually, which I think I was talking about recently. Oh, hey, what's going on? There he is. The man is here, so you can answer our questions about this. Brian, what's going on? So I'm guessing, Brian, these were just all cut off tiny little pieces and you just glued them on, right? But what I was thinking, that I think it was in a live stream with Josh. Yeah. In the last live stream with Josh, for adding this kind of detail, I was saying how it seemed like the easiest way would be to just drill holes. You just drill a bunch of 1 millimeter holes, and then you have your 1 millimeter rod. You stick it in and clip it off, and stick it in and clip it off, and stick it in and clip it off. It's an easy way rather than dealing with tiny little pieces that you're trying to stick and glue onto there. But I don't know, which way did you do it, Brian? Maybe that is the way that you did it, and I just can't tell. Or these are just individually stuck on there. Took some cues from the illustration in the back of the Shinju archive. Little slices, yeah. So that would have been a pain. I'm sure you lost like half of them cutting off those tiny little pieces. So you just end up like sneezing and you blow 15 of them into oblivion. But I mean, it had to have been tedious, but not like the drilling method would be any less tedious. Either way, it's a tedious effort adding a bunch of like kind of rivet details like that, but it looks great, I think, overall. And if we go back to the finished photos, let's see how those ended up looking on the finished design. Where can we see that? Oh, it's on the underside of that panel, so we need like a photo up from the bottom. Well, not very visible in these photos, but it's up inside here. Sorry. I think if I remember correctly, Brian, this was a yes, Brian, you should say thank you to Chris, because Chris has been answering my questions about the build because he's much more familiar with it. So any questions and stuff that I've been having, Chris has been answering in the chat. So I believe, if I remember correctly, Brian, this was a project that like you were kind of tired of working on, and maybe at the end of it, you just kind of wanted to finish it. But to put that, I mean, it's just because of the angle of the photo. I'm sure you probably have more photos where you can actually see that detail more, but I wish that there would have been some, either like some detail painting or something to just bring out some of those details, because I think that ended up looking really cool, but you can't really see it in the photos. So it's just kind of a shame that we can't see that work that went up onto the inside of that panel there. So some detail painting on that would have been nice, or just, I'm sure you've got photos where you can see it better. But I think that was a nice, cool detail to add onto the inside of that panel. If you're going to have the panel open, then you got to make it look like the inside of a panel. So, yeah. He said lots and lots of photos, I'm sure. All right. So here it is, more about the front skirts there. So is there a photo showing what the original unaltered front skirts look like? So here you go. So like the front skirts really just have this kind of boring vent on there, nothing too much, but he added just kind of a more detailed sort of like housing sort of section there around the vents. It makes it look a little bit longer, and it just looks a little bit more interesting. So yeah, that looks good. I was saying, Brian, just before you got in, didn't want to flood, so maybe didn't want to pack in like too much detail painting and stuff like that, I guess you mean? Or didn't want to flood my email with photos. Yeah, either way. Yeah, I get what you mean, but it's all good. I was saying just before you get in, Brian, that if it were me, I maybe would have even extended these front skirts, the entire front skirt, or even like this middle section out a little bit more. Not that it looks like uneven, because you extended the middle part out, so there's like a jump between how far down the middle part extends, and then it kind of jumps up to where the side skirts are. The front skirts are. That unevenness doesn't necessarily, that is not bothering me. I just think that if it were me, I think maybe it would have been cool to extend out those front skirts a little bit. Or if you were even feeling super mad lad, you could scratch build the little sub arms coming out of there as well too. Because if you got this whole like the effect of the finished kit is with the arms out, and then the fingers out, and then if you had the sub arms out underneath there as well too, like even more arms going out everywhere. Could have been cool. Just a thought. And you could always still go back and add that even. I mean, it's all just a matter of just building the subarms and just basically gluing them up on the underside of this. You could still totally add that at this point. It's not a kind of thing where you would have to like go back and like completely rework this piece unless you were to extend it. But if you were just adding the subarms underneath there, you could do that pretty easily, I think. So there is a sense of a lot of the work that went into this. And then obviously the work, probably one of my favorite things about this, Brian, is what you did with the fingers. I think the fingers look great. So I'm wondering how you did that. Is that just like heated and bent rods of plastic there for making those sticking out. I totally missed the bus on the sub arms. Yeah, that would also be something, if you're not super familiar with the design, you might not even know that it has them. I mean, maybe even watched the movie, you've seen Gundam Unicorn, which I'm sure you have seen Gundam Unicorn, and maybe you just forgot that it has sub arms under there. So it's totally understandable that you would have missed that. But yeah, I just think this could be something cool. But yeah, I'm wondering how you made the kind of wires. Basically, the wires, they're meant to be sort of wires, but they're much thicker here on what you've done. But I think they look great for the fingers there. Those look really cool. I don't think we have a unpainted photo showing those parts, though. Oh, here it is. Oh, yeah. So they look like that's just like blue. What's it? It's a piece of runner, maybe, or something. Just like a blue rods from a runner just chopped up, I would guess. Also, should note that the actual fingers themselves are scratch built as well too. They're larger than the ones you can see. The ones on the backpack are much smaller, so the ones that he scratch built here are much larger. Cut off the original fingers and back filed, putty and super glue, drilled holes, and use actual wire. Oh, so they're actual just thick wire. Okay, there you go. I thought, or I just assumed that it would just be just bent plot plate, just like heated and bent, not plot plate, plastic rod. But there you go, it's actual wire. So then you can change the pose later if you want. But I'm not sure if you'd be worried about the paint cracking with that nice silver paint on there. If you try bending those wires, if it might crack the paint. So maybe don't try bending it. But yeah, anyway, they turned out looking great. And I think making them slightly larger, it was good too, because it makes them a bit more pronounced. Because I would be worried about making these front fingers larger and then they wouldn't match the back ones. But because the back ones are kind of like there to the back and the front ones are more to the front, there's that perspective thing anyway. So they don't look like unnaturally too much larger than the ones on the back. So I think that was a good bet to just go ahead and scratch build those and make them a bit larger. Looks good. So overall, as far as like the colors go, I mean, I know that you love green. It's not really particularly my favorite color, but just the application of it, the shading looks nice as well too. The white, the kind of quite large white accents that you get through the decals. Add a nice bit of white on there. On the like light blue sections, I'm wondering what color that is exactly. Try best to keep it in SD theme. Yeah. The light blue sections, I'm not sure. I was gonna say that I almost wish that they were a bit lighter, almost just like kind of white for like the face panel and like the top of the head and like the side of the shoulders. But I'm not sure if white would have been the right color either. But they're very kind of like light blue in tone, right? So just like color wise, yeah, I don't know about that, with that really bright green and then that kind of light blue, if that combination of colors is working. So that's why I'm thinking that maybe if this the light blue sections were in like white, but you have plenty of like white accents just from the decals. So I don't know if that would be right either. Maybe even like if they were opposite and they were in a darker green actually than the main green, because I think you do have a little bit of like a darker green in there, right? On some of these parts, there's two different colors of green, isn't there? Yeah. Because you got that like right here on the front of the head is in that darker green. So, yeah, I don't know. Tricky. Or even, I mean, just because like the original design, that's all red. So the head is like almost entirely red. The backpack is all red. So that color separation there is something that you added to make that a different color, where originally it's not a different color. So if you were just doing for like a color swap, basically swapping the red of the original kit for green, then these kind of light blue sections wouldn't exist at all. They would just be all red, which maybe I would like more, but I don't know, man. It's a tough one. So I think the different panels that you picked out to be different color, like here on the shoulders and on the backpack and on the head, I think were good choices of like where to pick out different panels to make a different color. Yeah, maybe if they were just a little bit closer to like off-white. Yeah. I think they were good choices to pick out. The faceplate's tricky. I'm not sure. That's maybe the one that I'm not sure about, just because I think we talked about this before. Anytime like painting a faceplate different color from the rest of the head is always like taking a gamble. Sometimes it works out, but I think it's pretty hard to do to make it work out. I think making it a lighter color than a darker color is definitely the right direction to go if you're going to do that. But I'm just trying to imagine if this was all solid green. I think probably I would have liked it just all solid green, but it's kind of hard to tell. Just really not a big fan of the green color. That's just subjectively. I think the paint looks great. It's just for me personally, I'm not a green guy, but I know you are. So it's also really like the finished product also has this really high gloss look as well too. It's very glossy, which is also not a personal preference of mine. So trying to look past my own preferences, but I mean, there's the application of the painting all looks nice. The modifications all blend really well. The finished product, I mean, nothing like jumps out at me. Like it's really easy to tell like, oh, that's clearly modified. So I think you blended the modifications into the kit really nicely. So I think it's really successful there. It looks really nice. So very cool. Not really too much else that I can add other than that about it. Chris says purple boys. Yes, obviously if this was Chris's, we'd be looking at a purple one. And Chris, you might be happy to know that I might be working on something purple in the very near future. I had an idea for something over the weekend that I really want to do. It's just the fact that I have a couple of the projects I'm juggling at the moment. But if I can work it in the very near future, you might see me working on something purple very soon. But thank you, Brian. Gloss and clean was a personal challenge. Yeah. Actually only built clean models last year as a personal challenge. Well, I mean, it's like I said, the paint finish and all that looks clean. The shading on it looked really nice. So the actual application of the paint and everything looked really great. It's just the green was kind of a tricky one for me. Not a color that I'm a fan of, but I mean, I think you did a good job on that. So it looks good. All right. Next one here we're going to look at is from Nim. Let's see. So let me find this here. Let's find his email to check. And it's going to be a little bit different one. So let me put this up on screen so you guys can see this while I check out he sent a little bit of background info in his email. So it's a knight. So I'm already immediately at a little bit of a disadvantage in that this is the kind of thing that I'm not normally used to critiquing something quite like this. But he said, just according to his email, it's almost all painted. I do have to figure out how to build a Viking-like shield. This is my custom Adepta Sororita McFarlane figure. There you go. The color choices are based on my Dungeons and Dragons human female fighter. I still have some cleanup painting to do as well as some light weathering and griming to do, painted by hand with Army Painter and Citadel paint. So still a work in progress and still needs to, still going to make a shield for this as well too. So it's a repainted McFarlane figure. Interesting. So let's see. Let's go back to the chat here. Chris, this is why I have Julio on the show. Yeah, it's not the kind of thing I'm familiar with, so I'm really only going to be able to give, just my 2 cents. I'll take that with a big grain of salt. But yeah, I mean, I think as far as like the colors, again, it's green. So exactly everything that I was just saying about how much I love green, take that into consideration. And it's got a really weird, I mean, this is just design-wise, the head is really strange looking. Sort of almost, for me, if I were just to see this, I would think that like the head like doesn't match the rest of the design. But maybe it does. Again, the whole just knights and this kind of aesthetic in general is just not something that I'm a fan of. So forgive the ignorance. But just like the base colors, I mean, colors look pretty good. Obviously, I still need some weathering and stuff just to kind of bring everything together, because it's just looking like just very simply painted at the moment, which that's what it is. So we have to just kind of take it as it is at the moment. But I think the colors look good. The silver looks nice. The silver look, I mean, is quite, as we were saying, like with a bunch of like the feedback on the clean contest feedback, we were talking about like how big the flakes are and like the metallics and something. But for something like this, it looks good. And for Gunpla, it can as well too. It just depends on the application. But I think the silver, this particular silver paint used, looks like a good look for this, and the gold looks nice. But yeah, definitely once you get this all like weathered, as in like filling this all in with some wash and everything, just to blacken in all the little details and everything, I think that's gonna look so much nicer. So I mean, as it is, looks like there's maybe a little bit of a mold line or something there on the back of the head, which would be hard to do much with at this point without having to sand that and repaint it. But let's see. Other than that, I mean, yeah, the gold parts look cool. This lighter kind of beige color used for the skulls, and then I think it's the same color maybe used for like these wings up here on the shoulder. It looks just like at a glance, it looks so similar to the silver. The only when like you see it in the light, you can see there's that reflection. It's very easy to tell the difference. But like, looking at it just from the front here, the knees especially, it just basically at first glance looks just the same color as the silver. So maybe on like those skulls and the wings up on the shoulder, I would make them just a little bit slightly lighter tone, or just go over that with like some like off-white and just like painting, like kind of accent painting it, like some of the raised areas. So not like a fully coating the whole thing in like an off-white paint, but just like painting in just like some of the raised areas a bit on there, just to kind of add a little bit of definition to that, and also kind of make it a little bit more obvious that it's a different color from the silver. Just because it's a very similar tone when seen from a distance, so it kind of blends together a little bit. That it just all looks silver, but it's a nice warm gold color, and the really dark colors for the kind of leather bits on there around the waist section look nice. I think those could also deal with could do with some like a highlight painting on there a little bit, just kind of a little bit lighter, warmer brown color, just to kind of highlight, just paint in some of the little like raised areas, highlight those a little bit, just slightly, nothing super drastic. So it'll be subtle, but just to kind of bring out some of the raised areas and details and stuff on those parts, because it's quite dark. But you could highlight that a little bit, and like the grenades on the front here a little bit too. So, and it's not, this type of painting is not my expertise, but just based on my limited knowledge of that, I would say some highlight painting around some of these areas, the non-metallic areas, will look nice, because with the metallics you just get that naturally. So like with the gold, you can see like you get just these natural accents, like this bright gold there from where the light hits it. But with these darker colors, you don't really get that. So you have to simulate that through the painting. So I would recommend doing that if you're keen. And then, yeah, I think once you get the weathering, some wash and stuff on there to bring out the details in the metallic areas especially, that'll look really nice as well too. But interesting, certainly something different from what we normally look at. And it's not the kind of usual thing for me, but I think, yeah, it'll look cool once you do some of that stuff, and then hit it with some kind of matte coat on, like especially the non-metallic areas. So like this cloth having that shine to it just looks a bit unnatural for it to be cloth, for it to be like that shiny. So in some matte coat on there, and then you get some nice different finishes. Like the metallic part will be nice and shiny, metally looking, and then the cloth and a more matte finish, you get some nice contrast there. The finishes will look cool. Very cool. All right. It's very heresy to unpaint. What is that? Revan, what are you saying? It's heresy to unpaint the fleur-de-lis was okay. Sorry, I don't know. Next, we've got Justin's. Ah, yes. Justin's Wing Zero Verka that he's working on here. This one also is still a work in progress at the moment, so it's not finished. We'll take a look at this. As I know what the fleur-de-lis is, but I didn't know what you guys are talking about. It's heresy to unpaint it, so I don't know, what does that mean? But paint it, it's gold. What am I missing? The ones on the chest plates, so those need to be painted in. Okay, yeah, I get what you mean. They're just silver. Okay. Right. So yeah, maybe again, he's not finished with this, so maybe those are still yet to be painted in. I got you, guys. Okay, sorry. Didn't get what you meant at the moment, but there you go. All right, so Justin's work on this, let me check back to his email, see what he said about it, but I think he didn't have too much commentary on this, just the fact that he said he's calling this Shattered Teardrop is the name that he's using for this, which reminds me, like as soon as like just reading Shattered Teardrop just reminds me of Converge. If you guys are Converge fans and if you're a fan of the most recent album, then maybe you also kind of get that thought pop into your head when you hear Shattered Teardrop. It kind of reminds me of that. Anyway. All right. Oh, Nim, you were here. Were you here the whole time in the chat while we were looking at your kit? Sorry about that. I didn't know that you were there. Oh, yeah, you were there. I didn't want to overwhelm it with gold, so I left them silver. Ah, okay. Talking about the fleur-de-lis on the chest. Sorry, Nim, I didn't see that you were there in the chat. Yeah, you were talking the whole time, weren't you? I wasn't looking closely at the chat, was I? And you also said I was going to dry brush white over to lighten them up. Yeah, I gotta put washes over them. So anyway, yeah. Sorry about that, Nim. But hopefully that very uninformed commentary was helpful in some way for you, at least. All right, let's take a look at Justin's here. Shattered Teardrop. So he's adding the LEDs in here, which the LED in that back panel of the leg looks great. We were talking about that recently, how I love to see LEDs add on like inside panels. So like when you have panels or like a cockpit open or something like that, or panels open where you get like the light coming from inside, looks very cool. Because I mean, not your standard like light going out the thruster bell or something like that. It's a little bit different where you're seeing like just like the glow of like lights on the inner frame sort of on the inside. So that looks awesome. I really like that. So it's I would definitely like to see that carried out through maybe a couple places on the kit, but it's the kind of thing that you could go overboard if you're trying to add that in like everywhere on the kit, which I don't think Justin's going to, but just in general, I would just say, you know, don't try to add like 15 of those everywhere throughout the kit, but having a couple nice little accents of that internal light coming out on the inside definitely could look cool. So that looks great, definitely. And just as far as like the color separation on the legs, pretty stark contrast between the different colors. We talk about this a lot, Josh and I, when you're doing like your sort of like RG style color separation. You don't want to go too stark with the contrast. You want it to be pretty subtle. And like obviously you have these parts where it's just like a completely different, like this dark navy color on those. But that's on these pretty small sections. So I think that'll be probably okay, because just these little smaller sections of that, I'll have to see how the kit looks, you know, when it's more completed. Here we can see like on the legs. And I think like, yeah, I'm not sure if it's working for me or not. The secondary color, this kind of like tan color there, also is quite dark. And like up on the top here, it's kind of like up in like the back and then like this little bit up on the corner. So I think it's okay. But this one like being right in the middle of this section, which normally is just kind of all a big solid white section, and is having this big dark shape right in the middle of that. Not sure if that's working for me. And then like the same thing with the legs, like the placement of this one here on the leg, I think because of its placement, that works because it's kind of a normal placement where we would see like a color app. I'm just trying to think back of different versions of the wing. Like I feel like the Wing Zero, like the TV version Wing Zero, has like a blue section right here on the leg, doesn't it? Or something. I could be totally wrong, but anyway, the placement of those is pretty good. There's this one here on the lower leg, I think is kind of maybe not working as much for me. Looking at this as a whole, it's the only one that maybe feels a little bit out of place if you're going to be adding more color separation and stuff on those. But the panel lining of that separation of that panel does look pretty good. This panel line added up here too, I'm not as convinced by because it's not continued onto the other side. So there's like a panel line here, but it's like just like logically, it's still one piece of armor because it's connected to there at the top. So having this panel lining separating the armor here below this detail just doesn't really seem like logical. There's no sense for that armor to be separated at the bottom, but not at the top, it feels like. So I maybe just hit that just with a little scribe right there at the top, just to separate that out. But again, after it gets already painted, it's kind of hard to do that. So just kind of in general, but like this panel here is added onto that. It's a bit thick. I kind of wish that was maybe a bit thinner. This detail, because I think the choice to add this type of scribe detail onto that particular part right there is right, but it seems quite wide. So I wish that was just a little bit thinner strip there of that. And then there's a scribe here added onto the back of the leg. That one looks okay as far as I can tell. The separation of that panel like that on the back of the thigh, that looks good. Just the one on the calf needs another little tick right there at the top of that. And you got the drill holes here on the front of the knee. Those look okay. As just like little added detail on that. I can get down with that well enough. I'm not sure how much of those are going to be. The problem with doing that is that if you just add only just these two on the knee, then it can look a little bit awkward having none of them anywhere else on the kit. So you have to do, like, if you do a few here, then you have to do a few and like a few other places to make it look consistent throughout the kit. And you also have to be careful not to overdo it. If you start adding drill holes everywhere, then it's really easy to kind of overdo that, and then you've got too many. But assuming that you have a couple here and there, so like you got a couple there on the knee, so then I would maybe add a couple like here onto the front skirt or something as well too, just to make it so that there's a good balance of, if you're going to add that type of detail in one area, it's going to look odd if that is not carried out into other areas of the kit as well too, if that makes sense. Yeah, so that dark panel on the lower leg right there was not really looking for me, and this one here on the front skirt also I think is quite dark. Also, like the shape of this panel line is a bit awkward to the shape of the front skirt. So this scribed panel there, the shape looks a bit awkward. I maybe would have made that like come up a little bit higher, because it's like the shape of the front skirt is it's like a vertical diamond shape, right? And then you have this detail added kind of breaks that shape, because it's just like a kind of doesn't have any verticality to that shape that you added. So if you had, like, you guys can see where my mouse is, right? Yeah. If this panel was like up a little bit higher, but then you don't want to get it too close to the edge of this, because then it's going to look a bit weird if it's too close to the edge of that armor panel. So I think the shape of that is a little bit awkward for the shape of the front skirt in general, and also the color is quite dark, so it's a pretty stark contrast for that, I feel like. I'm not sure if, and then like inversely, this light blue I think is a little bit too light. I'm not sure how much more of that light blue you're going to carry through the rest of the build, but you got some really dark blues, and then that light blue is really light. So I'm maybe like if that light blue was not quite as light, or if that was just like a little bit like a blue, like a little bit darker blue gray kind of color, would be kind of nice. because even though like the red is kind of dark, so if like all your colors are going to be kind of darker, then to suddenly have this like very, very light, like almost like pastel light blue color looks a bit out of place on there, I think. But let's see. So this is like just some weathering on the inside of the panel. We kind of skipped over this photo, but let's go back to this. I mean, the weathering looks really cool on there. Just from Justin's past work, that his weathering work's always really cool to see. So that looks great. And then up on the inside of the panels there. I'm just wondering about how it's going to match like with consistency overall. I mean, where areas are going to be weathered and where they're not, because the rest of everything looks, it's all super clean. And then, I mean, sorry, my nose is, I don't know, I'm so itchy today. Some allergy or something. I could understand how like then like naturally you'd think the inner frame would suffer a bit more wear and tear because that's where all the moving parts are, right? Even if it's not getting into any fights. So like the armor is staying pretty clean if the mobile suit's not getting like damaged or anything, but still the inner frame could maybe be suffering a little bit more wear and tear just from that's where all the moving parts are. But it is a bit weird having like these being quite heavily weathered compared with even like the rest of the inner frame all right next to there with no weathering on it, and then all the armor obviously looking very clean. So I'm not sure what the plans are going forward with that. If there's going to be more weathering added into other areas as well too or not, but at the moment it looks a bit out of place. The weathering itself looks nice, but I'm not sure how that's going to be carried onto the rest of the kit as far as like the consistency of that goes. Another great LED placement into the forearm there. That's looking really nice. So that's very cool. And again, here you can see, oh no, I'm just seeing a little bit of that light on there. Yeah. Again, you've got your kind of main, kind of like it's like I don't know, like a bright blue, royal blue kind of color. It's definitely darkened though, but you got kind of like your main blue color, and you've got like kind of like a little bit more kind of blue gray kind of color there. And this unfortunate paint chip there. I think the same thing happened to mine as well too. Putting these pieces together, it's such a tight fit there that end up chipping the paint. I'd have to go back and check, but yeah, I think like the same thing happened to mine. This panel line added onto here, again, I think the design and like the choice of making this type of panel line on this part is a good fit, except that there's, again, the line just goes to nowhere. So I think you need to close that off at the top. Or what I would do maybe is wrap this panel line around like this, going on to like the side of the section. If you just make it just a square rectangle, then it looks a bit kind of boring just having just a rectangle on there. It's kind of a bit too obvious. And it also looks like the panel line doesn't wrap around to the bottom of the part. So wrapping that around to the bottom and then having this go like off to the side and then up, I think would be kind of a maybe more interesting shape for this panel or something, rather than just closing it off at the top. So, but it looks just a bit unfinished there as it is. I think like the idea was right at the start. It just needs to be finished off with that part. But again, all the colors being quite dark, I think looks great. Oh, he did have that. Is that, yeah, there's that little bit of light blue here on the end. When here, because it's such a small little bit, I kind of don't mind that light blue quite so much here. As with this, it's a bit more apparent, being a little bit larger of a piece. So I don't know. I think I need to see the kit as a whole to judge that light blue. I think it's a bit too light, but if it is just a couple tiny little bits, then it might be okay. So I don't know. Maybe hold off my judgment on that for the time being, because on the forearm I don't mind it quite so much because it's such a tiny little piece. I'd have to see how the kit turns out overall, but definitely the LEDs look great on there, and the colors in general I think look really nice, and the shading and everything. Just a couple of color placements, like I mentioned, on the lower legs and the front skirts. I think those are probably a little bit too dark, and the one on like the top of the foot, I'm not sure. I'm thinking it doesn't really quite work for me as well too. And again, just because of the panel line scribe just kind of doesn't really match the shape of this part. It looks a bit awkward. having this kind of very like sort of like triangular piece, and then it's kind of broken with a big square in the middle of it. So I'm not sure where Justin's at as far as like his goals with this and what he's doing, but I'm guessing he's just kind of wanting to practice some scribing. And so I think like the actual scribe work all looks pretty clean. So I think like technically it's there, it just needs to, Justin, I'm directing this to you, I would say, just need to work a little bit on just the kind of pen line theory as far as like where you're placing the pen lines and why, and just to make them look like convincing panel lines, I think is the only thing. Because as far as like the actual process of scribing, it all looks pretty clean. I mean, your lines look good. So that part's down, and that's the hard part. And I guess it maybe is, some people I guess could argue is equally hard, but you picked kind of a difficult design to do it because it's such a iconic design that has such very specific shapes going on. So like to add to that, I think this one would probably be a little bit more of a challenge compared to some other designs. Damn. Anyway, I got like a feather on my nose or what? Dang. So we got two more then to look at here today. John's and Gilberto's. John's is a very blue Sazabi here. Let me get this up for you guys. And so this is a finished one, not a work in progress. I believe it's finished. Let me just go back and check his email as well too here real quick. John. Okay. So just checking back to his email, he said, it's an attempt at a candy blue Sazabi, as we can see this. Used Alclad black and chrome, and then Mr. Hobby clear blue. And finally, Splash Paints 2K gloss, so super gloss on that. I think I mainly struggle with getting an even layer each time with clear color, and struggled a bit to ensure that there wasn't areas with too much paint, which forced me to do 3 layers of clear blue to ensure I got an even tone and cover areas that were too light on the first pass. I think I would struggle trying to get a light clear coat down evenly. I'll give you some advice. Seem to be able to get a spoon fine, but then struggle on actual pieces. Okay, so I get what you mean, and we'll talk a little bit more about that here in a second. And then he just also said, also forgot to mention that I did attempt at mixing a custom teal with Mr. Color Clear Blue, Clear Green, and Lascivus Clear White for the darker pieces. They're supposed to be chameleon color shifting dark blue. Okay. So as far as like getting a solid coat with your clear color, I totally know what you're talking about. It's really hard to do when you're painting over silver with a clear color. It's really hard to see if you're getting a clear coat or not because you're seeing like a reflection of the silver. So it's hard to tell if the clear color is solid or not. And yeah, it's tricky to do. So I totally understand that, even though it's not like this type of painting is obviously, if you guys are familiar with my work, you know, this is not the kind of painting that I typically do, but like just I know from very limited experience of doing like just different pieces like this when you're painting clear color over silver or just something like that. Yeah, I find it tricky to do. I don't know how to give any advice regarding that. I think you just have to be comfortable with your spraying to know that even if it doesn't look it, you know you're getting a good solid coat of paint. So I mean, maybe just like when you go to do your clear color, before you start spraying on your silver pieces, spraying just like on a piece of paper or something, or just like a scrap part that you've just like spray, get like a couple of scrap leftover pieces and spray like just like some white primer on them, so you just have like a white base, and then get used to spraying on either that or just on a piece of A4 paper. Just a piece of paper would be simple enough. Spray your clear color so that you kind of get the feeling for how it feels spraying that color and getting a good solid coat, and then go and do that on your silver pieces. So even if it doesn't look even, you know, okay, I know this is the feeling of how it should feel to get a good solid coat of that clear color, if that makes sense. So hopefully that makes sense to you. But I mean, just looking at the photos here, I think it looks great. I think you did fine. Even if that's the thing too, is that even if the clear blue is a little bit uneven in certain areas, it'd be really hard to tell, at least for me. I don't know, maybe some people who are more into this kind of paint job, maybe would be able to tell. They'd be like, oh, you can clearly see it's uneven there. But I mean, for me, it just looks candy blue. I mean, I think you did fine. It looks great. As far as like the different colors go, I think it's fine. I don't know if I quite like the teal blue quite as much, especially down here on the feet. Where was the photo I was looking at before? Oh, I thought there was another photo. You could see that more. I don't know. Yeah, the two colors together, I'm not sure. I mean, I totally know what you were going for with having the like multiple tones of the color. It's in like the RG style with this RG kit. I'm not sure I like the teal color quite as much with that, but I don't know. It certainly doesn't look bad at all. I think it looks fine. Yeah, as Worf said there in the chat, I feel like the unevenness kind of hides itself. Actually, yeah, totally. I mean, because of the candy coat like style, you're gonna get light bouncing all over this thing. So even if the paint is slightly uneven, no one's really gonna be able to see that, I think, mostly. So as long as you get like a pretty good solid coat over everything, if it's not completely even, it's gonna be pretty hard to tell. I am seeing like some texture in there, probably from your clear gloss coat, because I think you said you ended up having to do like a few coats of that. Like you can see here on the face, you can see some of that texture from the gloss coat, I'm guessing, probably. And then on some of these parts, you're seeing that on this. Honestly, it doesn't bother me all that much. Some people, I think, would probably point that out. And then like down here, as like an orange peel or whatever, it might bother some people more, but honestly, I wouldn't care that much about it for me personally. Hey, what's going on, Mike? And it looks like maybe like the teal, you can see a little bit of the uneven paint here on this teal part, because you can see it looks like maybe there's a little bit more of like a buildup of the paint pigment on there. You can see that kind of like dark shadow. I think that's probably from a build up, maybe a little bit of pooling of your clear color on there a bit. So you can see a little bit of that on there, but I mean, for the most part, it looks pretty clean to me. It looks pretty solid, the color. And the gloss coat on most areas, I think, looks fine. Just on some areas, looks like you got a little bit of texture on there, but not really so much that I would really worry too much about it. I think it ends up looking pretty boss as far as candy color goes, like metallic kind of paint jobs. You guys know I'm not really a big fan in generally, but I think it looks awesome. Very nice. The pose is a bit awkward. I would want to work on that a little bit. Putting all that work and making the kit look as good as you did, I would work on the pose just to get it looking in just a more nice, solid pose. I appreciate all the close-up photos. It's great for us to look at the kit here in this context. But I want to see some cool photos of this, just wider photos like this, where we can see the whole kit and in like a good solid pose. So tweak the pose a little bit and take some more photos and send those in the Discord so we can see that, John. And yeah, I'll be looking forward to it. But no, I think it looks great. You did a good job. Yeah, I do really like on the blue, like when you get these like deep shadows there in the blue and just looks like very wet. from that gloss coat. It looks nice. It's a really cool look, sort of like you're looking into the ocean, looking into the deep sea of your Sazabi. So very cool. What did Mike say? And if the feller wants a really smooth gloss coat, get the elbow grease out and wet sand and polish it. Yeah, then you could do that. If the texture does bother you and you do want to clean that up, yes. Yeah. Like Mike said there in the chat. Wet sand that a little bit, polish it. You can. Let's see. Oh, John, you're here in the chat. Okay. Have you been here the whole time, Dan? Sorry, I need to pay more attention to the chat. Sorry, guys. Once I'm looking at the photos, I'm just focusing on the photos and not like going back to the chat unless I had a question about it. But yeah. Let's see. John said, not sure how people do light candy layers. What else? Maybe you just popped in just while we were looking at yours. So sorry about that, John. What else do you say? I'm meaning to go back and wet sand a bit, but what is it? Take a break from it. Yeah, I can understand too, wanting to step away from a project a little bit and maybe not feeling completely done with it. Afraid of handling it. Try to get better poses. It wouldn't take a lot to, I mean, you don't have to put in like some like dynamic, like, super crazy pose, but just to tweak the pose a little bit just to get, you know, like kind of your standard angles to get a just good solid standing pose. Yeah, white gloves, as Mike was saying as well too. So yeah, I wouldn't bother with it because yeah, I mean you're worried about scratching the paint and damaging the finish and all that, but just tweak the pose a little bit. You can get it looking good. Go back and do some wet sanding if you feel like it. But I mean, if you're worried about it, then I would say don't worry about sanding it. But I think it came out looking very cool. So you should be happy with that, I think. Brian, what is going on with that? I'm trying to read Brian's message, and it seems like instead of periods between the sentences, there's nothing. So I'm trying to read that. Making your way in the world today takes everything you've got. Taking a break from all your worries sure would help a lot. Wouldn't you like to get away? Is that like song lyrics or something? You just like copy and paste it into, and that's why there's no periods between the sentences, or what? What's going on with that? All right. Then the last one we have to look at here today is a Yoda from Gilberto. Let me pull up his email. This one's pretty cool. Little Yoda here, isn't it? So he said, submission was a fun side project to branch out from my comfort zone. It's Bandai's 1/12 scale Yoda. The included display base was modified to make the recessed sections to add water effects. Fortunately, it got carried away and made the water too murky.
Extra box.
What size?
Any size, big or whatever.
Can you wait a few minutes? He says, I improvised and made the water look more like sludge. Magnets were added to secure Yoda to the base. Zenithal style priming was done to create the shadows. Pin washes were done to create depth and maintain tonal variation. The base colors were airbrushed as well, accented by hand painting. A combination of cork and milliput were used to give the base some shape. And the leaves were cut out using a punch. And the branch was a twig from the backyard and painted to match the colors on the display. This project was completed in February, a retirement gift for a coworker mentor. Okay, so a lot of work into this little guy here. Let's see. Friends theme song? Cheers theme. Okay, yeah, there it is. Okay, well, thank you, Brian. It's a little bit older one for me. As for this Yoda, this looks really cool. I like this at a glance. Let's take a closer look. The Zenithal painting or painting technique on the kit worked out really well. It looks great. Gives you really nice depth of shadow there on the kit with me, which is a small kit. So you really had to push the shadows on that. It's the same thing for that's why the technique is usually used for painting minis and stuff, right? Because you don't have a whole lot of space to work with. So you really have to push the shadows on that. So that ended up working great. One thing that really I think would have been cool to do, there's not a whole lot that you can do about that mold line, is there, without sanding away the details. So I mean, that's a tough one. Really, the only thing that you could do would be like to sand the mold line away and then like remake the detail entirely by like then putting some putty on there and like trying to press that pattern back into the putty or something. I don't know. That'd be a challenge to do, but the mold line there is unfortunate. Yeah, that would be a tough one to work out. But also what I was going to say would be to fill in this gap in the cloth as well too, just so it looks less of like a model kit pieces and looks like more of just like one actual cloth robe. So just filling in that gap, because it's a pretty stark shadow there. I mean, even if there's a line separating that, if you're thinking like it's a cloth that's sewn together, so there would be kind of a line there between the two pieces of fabric where they're sewn together, but it's a pretty stark shadow there because it's a gap between two pieces of plastic. So filling in that, I think, would have been nice. You can see some areas where it looks like he did probably sand the mold line, like on here, so that pattern is smoothed out. Yeah, that'd be a tricky one. Not easy to get rid of that without completely redoing that. You can see the mold line going around here on the edge of this part as well too. So understandable that would be a bit of a challenge. Yeah, like Woe Priest there. Saying just say it's closed seam. So yeah, anything if it's closed, yeah, you can kind of pass off seams between parts as seams within cloth, because cloth has seams like a t-shirt has seam lines, right? So that exists. But this one, I mean, just I think it's also just due to the painting style. The shadows are really intensified. The base though is super cool. The fog technique on that, or just the added fog effect of just some cotton or whatever is maybe used for that. I think obviously when you look at it up close, it kind of, you lose the effect of it. But if you're looking at it from any distance, it looks great add on there. So I think that's nice. What he was saying about how he thought he overdid it a little bit with the water kind of sludge effect. Yeah, again, like if you look at it up close, it's like it looks a bit like a tar pit or something going on here. I guess it looks less like just kind of wet mud, how it's supposed to look. But again, I mean, like from a distance, I think it looks great. It's only when you really look at it up close. The leaves, I think, look nice for the scale. The colors are maybe also would have painted those a little bit more, just to kind of give those a little bit more kind of color variation, because the colors look fine for what they are. It's just that they need a bit more variation, I think, probably in them, because they just look a little bit like punched out pieces of leaves. So painting on those a little bit more to make some parts of the leaves look kind of like wet, or some more dried, or some leaves look having a bit more variation in there, I think could look nice as well too. Most of like the base of like where you see Yoda actually connected to the base is kind of hidden by the fog for the most part, so you can't really see it all that much. But it does look a little bit like he's standing on top of the mud rather than in the mud. So a little bit of that mud up onto like the edge of the feet maybe could have been cool. And it also looks like this here on like the side of the cloth is like some like kind of penoline wash or something, like a wash added into like the folds of the cloth that needed to be kind of thinned out a little bit more as well too, because it looks like it's just laid in there with the paintbrush, whatever, and then needs to be worked out a little bit more. I'm not sure what the correct feathered out. Is that what you guys would say? Mike's in the chat. He would know the correct word for that. But so you can see like this in here in the folds. But again, it's only when you really are up close that you notice that. I think this is the kind of thing that, I mean, it's only when you're up close you're seeing like some of these things that I'm pointing out about it. From the just looking at it like this, it looks great. I think it looks really nice. So I mean, certainly something, if you just have this up on your shelf, it's just a nice looking piece. Definitely. The Zenithal painting definitely worked out really nice for this. Definitely. Let me see. Revan's off. See it. I'd say maybe more layers of shadows to blend together for added realism. Painting minis is so not me. Yeah. I know, Mike, it's kind of hard to give advice about something. It's not my forte, but could use a bit wet blending, as Brian said. So yeah, I think some more work on like a couple of those areas, but especially if you're just making this as just a gift for a friend, I mean, they got to be happy with that. It's really cool. And just really nice kind of simple work down on the base, and nothing too fancy. Did some building up on that, adding some wet effects, adding some leaves, sticks, and the fog. And it looks cool. So a few things to maybe keep in mind, to pay attention to, like if you're going to do something like this again in the future. But yeah, very nice little piece of Yoda. It's cool. I like it. There you go. All right. PE plants for the win. Like this man has never added a figure to a model. What? My figure work is pretty awful. But hey, I like doing it, so I don't mind. Anyway, I think that's all we have for today. Let's see. Yeah, we covered everybody. So thank you guys, those of you who submitted your works. And I know most of the guys were able to be here and live during the chat, so that's great. If you guys watch it later, that's fine too. Again, for those of you guys who are watching and just wondering about this series, if you've never seen this series before, the works that we're looking at here today are just from my wonderful Patreon supporters. So if you guys are interested in submitting works for future critiques, we could look at, obviously, as you saw today, finished works and or work in progress stuff. So whatever those guys are working on, whenever I'm getting ready to do a critique video like this, I just give them a heads up and they send just whatever they're working on or whatever they want to show off. So like he said, that Yoda figure, he finished back in February. Brian's, I know he finished his SD Neo Zeong a while back as well too. So it doesn't necessarily even need to be something current you're working on, but try to do these about once a month. Try to fit them in. And so, yeah, if you're interested, check out my Patreon page. But thank you guys for hanging out today. Thanks for hanging out there in the chat, you guys. And it's going to be it for today. Until next time, guys, we'll see y'all later. We'll be doing some more feedback, I think, probably for the contests on the clean and weather side are both not finished yet. So I think we'll probably be doing a little bit more. But again, it's not scheduled out yet. So we'll let you guys know about that if you're wondering about feedback regarding your contest entries. We'll let you guys know. But for now, that's going to be it for today. So see you guys all later. Have a good one. Bye, guys. Bye-bye.